My name is Lisa Walker, and I live in Chicago, United States of America. When I say live, I mean I built a life for myself here, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, with no help from anyone. I was proud of that. Every month, I paid $2,150 in rent for a two-bedroom apartment that I called my house. On top of that, I carried the weight of my student loan, another $480 each month that seemed to vanish before I could even breathe. And yet, I never missed a payment. I kept every receipt in a blue folder that lived in the kitchen drawer, neatly stacked in order. That folder was proof. Proof that I was the one holding the roof above our heads. Proof that the house was mine, in every way that mattered. I liked my little Chicago home. It wasn't fancy, but it had hardwood floors that creaked in the winter and big windows that let in golden morning light. The living room smelled faintly of coffee, because I never went a morning without it, and my room was filled with books I had collected since college. It was my space, my safe, earned place. That was before my brother came. My brother's name is Ethan Walker. To describe him in one word, I would use spoiled. He always had this way of floating through life, expecting the world to bend for him. If he got into trouble, my mother would bail him out. If he needed money, she would twist her face in pity and somehow find it. And then there was his wife, Sierra. She was the type of woman who could spend an entire afternoon filing her nails while bills piled up on the table, the kind of woman who believed life owed her comfort without effort. Together, they were a storm I never wanted under my roof. But one cold Tuesday afternoon, Ethan called me. His voice was too casual, too light. "Hey, Lisa. Things are a little tight. Sierra and I just need a place to crash for a while." I paused. My gut tightened. I told him the truth. "This place is small. I don't have the space." He chuckled like I'd said something funny. "Come on, it's family-sized. You've got 2 bedrooms, right? What's the harm?" The harm was clear. My peace. My space. My money. But Ethan had never cared about that. For him, family was just another word for free ride. A week later, it wasn't just Ethan pressing me. It was my mother. Caroline Walker, strong-willed and sharp-tongued, appeared in my doorway one Saturday morning without even knocking. She smelled of perfume too heavy for the morning and carried that look in her eyes that told me she had already made a decision I wasn't going to like. "Clear a room for your brother," she said. Just like that. As if it were her name on the lease. As if my months of scraping and paying didn't matter. I straightened my back. "No. This is my house, Mom. I pay for it. I won't move out of my own room." For a second, I thought she might hear me, might understand the truth of what I was saying. But instead, her face twisted in anger. Before I could take another breath, her hand struck my cheek, hot and sharp. I heard the crack more than I felt it. "You don't talk to me like that," she hissed. Her voice was low, but full of fury. "Your time is up." I stood frozen. She slapped me, her own daughter, the one who carried the weight of this house. My mother had never been gentle, but in that moment, something inside me snapped. She ordered me to get out, to hand over my room, my bed, and my desk for Ethan and Sierra. Behind her, Ethan leaned against the wall with his usual lazy smirk, as if he had won some invisible battle. Sierra didn't even bother looking at me. She was too busy examining her nails, as though the drama unfolding in my house was beneath her attention. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind them all that it was my name on the lease, my money that had been poured into this roof, my blue folder of receipts that proved I had built this life. Instead, I felt the sting on my cheek and the heavier sting in my chest. My family had turned me into a stranger in my own home. But if they thought they could break me, they were wrong. I wasn't going to stand there and beg for scraps of respect. I went to my room, the room they were so eager to take from me, and I packed my laptop into my bag. I pulled out the blue folder with every payment, every receipt, every letter from the bank. It was heavier than I remembered, and holding it reminded me that I wasn't powerless. My face was burning, but my hands were steady. I zipped my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked to the front door. Nobody tried to stop me. Not Ethan with his smirk, Not Sierra with her nails, not my mother with her angry eyes. They thought they had pushed me out. They thought they had won. But as I locked the door behind me and slid the key into my pocket, I knew the truth. The key was mine. The lease was mine. The money was mine. They forgot that part. When I walked out of that house, the house I paid for, the house I thought was mine, the city air hit me like a wave. Belmont Avenue stretched out in front of me, noisy and alive, the sidewalks dotted with coffee shops, grocery stores, and strangers carrying shopping bags. My backpack felt heavy, but not just because of my laptop. Inside, tucked carefully, was my blue folder, the evidence of every dollar I had poured into that apartment. That folder was the only shield I carried as I stepped away from my mother, my brother, and his wife. It was cold that morning, the kind of Chicago cold that slices through coats and rattles your bones. I pulled my scarf tighter, but still, I felt something deeper than the wind, a strange mix of loss and freedom. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back. As I walked, I opened my phone and searched for a place to stay. I found a small hostel in Lakeview, just a short bus ride away, for $39 a night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean and safe. I booked a week, telling myself that 7 nights would give me enough time to figure out the next step. I stopped at a street vendor on the corner, lured by the smell of grilled onions. I bought a hot dog for $4. Standing on the sidewalk, with mustard smudging the napkin, I counted what I had left, $120 in cash, and my bank app showed $3,460. Enough to breathe. Enough to start over. After eating, I sat on a bench and let the city pass by. My hands were still stinging from the weight of what had just happened. My own mother had slapped me. She had chosen Ethan and Sierra over me. I pressed my fingers to my cheek, not to feel the sting, but to remind myself it was real. I pulled out my phone and called Susan, my closest friend, who had moved to New York 2 years earlier. She picked up on the second ring. "Lisa? What's wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "I'm out," I said simply. "Out where?" "Out of the house. They kicked me out, Susan." There was silence for a moment, then her voice came back firm, steady. "Come stay with me. You can crash here as long as you need." I closed my eyes, grateful for her offer, but I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. "Not yet. I need to think. I need to breathe." "Then promise me you'll be safe," she said. "I will," I answered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. When the bus came, I climbed aboard and rode to the hostel. The ride took me past familiar blocks of Chicago brick buildings, bars with neon signs, and little grocery shops that reminded me of all the Saturdays I spent buying food for a household that never once thanked me. I watched it all pass by like it belonged to someone else's life. The hostel was plain but bright. The clerk gave me a key to a small room with a twin bed and a single lamp. It wasn't much, but when I set my bag down, I felt a strange relief. This bed, this space, even rented by the night, was mine alone. No Ethan. No Sierra. No mom standing over me, demanding more. That evening, I sat at the little desk in the corner of the hostel room and opened my blue folder. I flipped through every page. The lease agreement, the rent receipts, the loan payment records. My name appeared again and again, proof stamped in black ink. Ethan's name wasn't there. Sierra's name wasn't there. My mother's name wasn't there. My fingers hovered over the lease. My signature was the only one on the dotted line. For the first time all day, a small spark of confidence lit inside me. I turned on my laptop and wrote an email to my landlord. I told him I had left the unit because of trouble, that I couldn't live there anymore. I didn't explain everything, just enough for him to understand. I hit send, my heart pounding like I'd confessed a secret. Less than an hour later, he replied, "Lisa, you're the tenant of record. We can move you to the sunny one-bedroom on the 3rd floor if you want. Same price. Let me know." I read the words twice, then a third time. The sunny one-bedroom. My own space. My own window. Same rent. Same lease. No freeloaders. No shouting. I sat back in the chair, letting out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The heater in the room hummed gently, and outside the window, the city lights flickered like stars trapped in glass. For the first time in weeks, I felt the corners of my mouth lift into a smile. A real smile, not the forced ones I used to wear when Ethan brought his problems through my door, or when Mom scolded me for not doing enough. This was a smile that belonged only to me. That night, I lay in the narrow hostel bed and listened to the quiet. My cheek still held the faint memory of her slap, but it no longer felt like pain. It felt like a mark of change. She had thought she was pushing me out. Instead, she had pushed me forward. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." And for the first time, I believed it. A month had slipped by since I carried my backpack, my laptop, and the blue folder out of the apartment I once called home. By then, I was no longer living out of a hostel. My landlord had kept his word, and I had moved into the third-floor unit of the same building. It was smaller than the old place, but it was mine alone. No freeloaders, no family drama. The walls were painted a soft beige, the carpet clean, the window wide enough to catch the sunrise. The first night I spent there, I sat cross-legged on the bare floor, eating takeout lo mein from a paper carton, and told myself, this is freedom. Even if it was just me, one lamp, and a floor to sit on, it was mine. Over the next weeks, I carefully built it into a home. I bought a used couch for $85, carried up the stairs with the help of a kind neighbor. I found a little round table at a thrift store for $30, scratched and worn, but steady enough to hold my laptop. Slowly, the apartment began to look like more than a shell. It looked like a life starting over. One day, while wandering through a flea market, I found a framed photo of London. It was just a tourist print, the kind you'd find in any gift shop, but the picture of Big Ben against a dusky sky caught my eye. I had never been to Europe, but seeing that photo reminded me there was a whole world outside of my family's chaos. I bought it for $10 and hung it on my wall. Beneath it, I taped a note. One day, #1, 000 for the trip. That little dream became my anchor. For a while, life was quiet. I went to work, I came home, I cooked small meals. I felt the peace of walking into a space that belonged only to me. But peace never lasts long when it comes to my family. It was a Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. The number flashing on the screen was my mother's. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I slid my finger across the screen. The second I answered, her voice cut through, sharp and demanding. "Why haven't you sent the $3,000 yet?" I almost dropped the phone.
What?
"Don't play games with me, Lisa," she snapped. "For the house. For your brother and Sierra. For the food, the bills, everything. You owe us." I froze. A laugh bubbled up before I could stop it. Not a cruel laugh, just disbelief, the kind that comes when someone demands something so absurd you don't know whether to scream or cry. "For the house," I repeated slowly. "Mom, I paid the rent every month. I paid the loans. That house was mine. You kicked me out of it. I don't owe you $1. Her voice grew louder, shriller. "Don't you dare talk back to me. We've been struggling. Ethan has been looking for work. Sierra isn't feeling well, and the bills are piling up. You're the only one with money. You will send the $3,000 or you'll regret it." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, staring at the golden square of sunlight warming the floor of my new apartment. My jaw tightened. I thought about all the nights I stayed up late working extra hours, all the mornings I woke up to pay bills that no one else lifted a finger for. And here she was, demanding more, as if I hadn't already sacrificed enough. "No," I said, my voice firm this time. "I won't send you money. Not now, not ever." She cursed under her breath, then shouted louder, her words blurring into anger. I pulled the phone away, letting her voice fade into the background. I stared at my London photo, the little note beneath it, and suddenly I felt something shift inside me. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need her voice in my ear, dragging me down. With one deliberate motion, I pressed end call. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Minutes later, the phone buzzed again. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. Call me back. We need you. Don't abandon us. I set the phone face down on the table and walked into the kitchen. My hands were calm. My heart, though racing, felt steady, like a drum that finally found its rhythm. That night, I sat at my thrift store table and made 2 jars out of old glass candle holders. I labeled the first one emergency, $500. The second one I labeled Europe, £1, 000. From my wallet, I slipped $50 into the emergency jar. For the Europe jar, I wrote £20 on a sticky note and dropped it inside. It wasn't real currency, but it made the dream feel closer. Looking at those jars, I realized something. My life was finally mine to build. I didn't have to answer her calls. I didn't have to explain myself to Ethan or Sierra. I didn't have to carry anyone else's weight. Every dollar I put away was a brick in the wall that separated me from them. I brewed tea and sat by the window, the city lights twinkling below. I thought of all the years I'd wasted trying to be the good daughter, the responsible sister, the one who held everything together. And now, in this little one-bedroom, with jars holding the first sparks of my future, I felt more alive than I ever had. The phone kept buzzing for days. Sometimes it was my mother. Sometimes it was Ethan. Once, Sierra herself texted, "It's family. You have to help." But I didn't respond. Their words no longer had power. Instead, I focused on my jars, my job, and my own peace. I began to see that a beautiful life wasn't something I had to beg for. It was something I could build, step by step, dollar by dollar, and one choice at a time, and that was the moment I knew. I hadn't lost my family. I had freed myself from them. When I first moved into the one-bedroom on the 3rd floor, it was only half a home. The walls were bare. The carpet still smelled faintly of cleaner, and the echo of my footsteps made the place feel more like a waiting room than a sanctuary. But over time, I filled it not with hand-me-downs or guilt-bought trinkets from my family, but with pieces chosen by me, for me. The second-hand couch, the thrift store table, the London photo, and its little note about saving £1,000. Bit by bit, my apartment became a place that carried my signature in every corner, and then life gave me a gift I didn't expect: a better job. I had been working at a small marketing office handling spreadsheets and phone calls when an old colleague told me about a position at a design studio on Wabash Avenue. I hesitated at first. Doubt still clung to me like a shadow, but I sent in my portfolio and a short letter. Within a week, they called me in for an interview. The studio was nothing grand, just a sunlit office with hardwood floors and sketchboards pinned to the walls, but the energy inside felt different. The boss, Olivia, greeted me with a handshake that was firm but warm. She had sharp eyes and a quick smile, the kind of woman who had built her business by valuing both creativity and discipline. "We'll start you at $28 an hour," she said after skimming my resume, "and if things go well, we'll talk about a raise." My heart nearly burst. It wasn't just the pay, though that was more than I had earned before. It was the trust in her voice, the way she spoke to me as though I was worth investing in. 2 months later, Olivia called me into her office again. "You're doing good work," she said simply. "I'm raising you to $32 an hour." Just like that. No lecture about family obligations. No sigh about how much I should be sacrificing for someone else. Only recognition, clean and direct. With that raise came a new way of living. I learned to budget differently, not out of fear, but with intention. I created small envelopes for groceries, rent, savings, and my Europe jar. I began to price my time, not just in dollars, but in peace. Every hour I worked had to mean something. Every dollar I saved was another piece of the wall I was building around my freedom. At home, I added little comforts. I bought a plant, a leafy green one that stretched toward the sun from my window. I named it Darcy, after a character from one of my favorite books. Taking care of it each morning, watering, turning the pot toward the light, reminded me that growth could be slow and steady, but it was real. I learned to cook again. Not the rushed meals I used to throw together while juggling bills and family complaints, but real, simple food that tasted like care. Pasta with garlic and olive oil. grilled chicken with rosemary, pancakes on Sunday mornings just because I wanted them. My small kitchen became a place of calm, and on weekends, I rediscovered the city. I would walk by the lake, let the wind tangle my hair, and watch families toss frisbees on the grass. Sometimes I called Susan in New York, and we'd laugh about little things. Her neighbor's barking dog, my clumsy attempts at baking bread. For once, conversations weren't filled with heaviness or complaints. They were just light, simple, and good. Of course, the peace didn't go unchallenged. One evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "We're tight this month. Can you spot us $200? I stared at the screen for a long moment. The old me, the one desperate for approval, eager to be seen as the responsible sister, might have scrambled to find the money. But the new me simply set the phone down on the table, face down, and left it there. I owed them nothing. Not after what they had taken from me. Not after the slap, the eviction, the endless demands. I owed myself peace. And peace had no price tag. Weeks passed without contact, and for once, I didn't miss the calls. My mother still tried, of course. The phone would buzz with her name flashing on the screen, but I let it ring out. Her voice had been nothing but commands and criticism for too long. I refused to let it seep into this new life I was building. One evening, as I brewed tea in my kitchen, the sky outside turned pink. The light spilled through the window, washing the walls in soft colors, and for a moment the whole apartment felt like it was glowing. I carried my mug to the window, stood with the steam rising in my hands, and looked out at the city. The old memory surfaced, the sting of her hand on my cheek, the sound of her voice telling me, "Your time is up." But now, thinking of that day didn't burn me. It didn't ache. It was just a memory, like a door I had already closed. I realized then that I held something more powerful than her anger or their neediness. I held the key to my own door, the key to my own table, the key to my own life. My jars sat on the shelf behind me, one slowly filling with dollar bills for emergencies, the other with notes for my Europe dream. They weren't full yet, but they didn't need to be. Every slip of paper, every folded bill, was proof of the future I was building. The phone buzzed again, another call from my mother. I didn't even glance at the screen this time. I let it ring, and when it stopped, the silence felt like music. I had ended my relationship with her. Not out of cruelty, but out of survival. I could no longer be the daughter who bent, who paid, who sacrificed until there was nothing left. I chose instead to be the woman who claimed her own life, who stood tall in her own space, who built something better. As I sipped my tea and watched the pink sky fade to blue, I thought of everything I had lost and everything I had gained. For the first time, I didn't feel small or forgotten. I felt present. I felt alive. A beautiful life was right before my eyes. And this time it was paid for by me.